Thank you, Lynn. Now, folks, thank you for having me, and this is a great and wonderful opportunity to be here in this eco-village and to be in Karumba. I just want to explain to you, yes, I'm a barrister. There's not many of us in the legal fraternity that advocate for people with electromagnetic radiation issues.
How about we use the other one?
Is it a bit late?
Well, let's get rid of this.
What's it? No. That noise. Okay. Electromagnetic radiation, folks, that's what it was. I guess if you want to know who I am, the best thing is just to go and Google my name, and you'll see that there's quite a fair bit about who I am. There's some videos out there where I did the Wilson's Creek Telstra Tower. I don't know if you remember that. And we won. Yay! And I'm a lawyer and I'm a strategist. So I strategise and I work very, very carefully on how to fix up people's problems. And basically, the best way to explain this, many years ago, probably about 6 years ago, I had a lady that came to me and said that she was sensitive to electromagnetic radiation, and I thought, what's that? I had no idea, very sceptical. I thought, okay, but she's my client. I listened to her and I believe her. That's why she's come to me. And it's come to the journey where I am today. And I've never given up on her. And it's just that I happen to have enveloped a huge EMR family since. There have been literally thousands and thousands of people in this country who have electromagnetic radiation. Just to give you an idea, next weekend I'll be in Perth doing a very similar thing, and we're expecting at least 300 or 400 people to that event. So I'm actually asked to go and do a lot of this stuff Australia-wide. Now, WINS, and how does it work? Okay, I'm a lawyer and I stick to the law and I stick to the facts, and I use the law it can be a beautiful device, and that's exactly how I've applied it, and it's worked. Okay, Wilson's Creek, there was a strategy. Basically what we did was we realised that we had to use the precaution principle, and we had to use and basically put the council into a certain frame mind and think tank, but also put them into a place where they could arm themselves to stop the telco. And that's exactly what we did. Basically scripted what was to be said in the council meeting, and the council unanimously said, that's it, get lost, we don't want it. Okay? So Wilson's Creek was a big win. But I've had a bigger win. Okay? Who's heard of 5G TPG? Put your hand up. Okay. Brisbane, Sydney, New South Wales and Melbourne, TPG was about to roll out small cell facilities for 5G, and they were to do it basically for 2,500 sites. It was going to cost them nearly $6 billion to do it. So far, when I got involved, they'd set up about 900. Now, there was a group of doctors in a street called Dundas Street in Coogee. And I don't know if anyone saw that on A Current Affair. That was part of the strategy. Okay. Now what we did there was that basically the issue that you've got to understand here is that when this stuff is actually in a doctor's backyard, they don't like it. Okay? Does that make sense? So, and we also had 4 lawyers on that street, and they didn't know what to do. And they knew I was around, so they gave me a call. We then worked out a strategy on how to put TPG in its place. And the thing was to basically explain to them what the problem was. And how I did it, folks, was quite simply using science as against medical opinion. Okay? Now you've got PANZA, and you've probably heard of that organisation before, and PANZA sets guidelines and limits as to the EMR safety guidelines. They say this is the safety limit that we set, blah, 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 and they keep coming out with all this stuff saying there's no scientific evidence that we can conclude that there is that it is injurious to human health. Well, is PANZA qualified to say that? Is a doctor's opinion more important than a scientist's? What I've worked on the precautionary principle is this, that if there's a known risk and the risk is foreseeable or it comes from an expert, particularly in the medical field, then that is a risk. All laws in this country work on the precautionary principle premise, in that all laws, the underlying policy is that if there's a risk, you're to address that risk and minimise that risk. So what I did is I realised that the trick to this, if you are concerned about electromagnetic radiation affecting you or your children, go and see a doctor and ask your doctor, excuse me, doc, is this stuff safe? Okay, I want you to look at the science. I want you to interpret it as a doctor. You're not you obviously know science, but your job is to interpret it for me and tell me, will my kids be safe? And that's how I've used it. Okay? I've got a whole heap of doctors now who are right on board, okay, who are categorically saying that this stuff is harmful and it is a risk to human health. Okay. So what we're currently witnessing here, folks, now I'll keep going back to the 5G anyway. So what happened was, I then did a strategy. I organised, there was a 5G consultation meeting. We managed to get council, we got all the doctors to attend, or most of them, and I got some doctors, flew in some experts from around the state to come in and have a bit of a chat. We had a doctor who was part of the TPG team, but he wasn't a medical doctor, he was a scientist. So here we had the science and the doctors on the other side of the fence, and we absolutely hammered them, okay? But at the same time, I drafted up an advice on the precautionary principle to the residents of Dundas Street. And in that advice, I made it very, very clear as to what the law was and the legal ramifications that were imposed on it. They served that on them at the meeting, and then I wandered around. They didn't know that I was there. I kept very quiet. And I had a little bit of a tap on the shoulder, and I spoke to one of the TPG people there, and I mentioned my name, and their face went absolutely white. And when I showed them I said, you just got, I believe you got your little hand, something that's just been served with you. And I went, yes. And they realised the game was up, okay? TPG then, what we did is we said, look, just move it somewhere else. You don't put the flipping thing, don't put it in our street, don't put it down somewhere else. Well, I then told them that I'm not only doing Dundas Street, I'm doing it all over the country. I said, you think Wilson's Creek's just one and you got Dundas Street's one? I'm all over the place. And when they realised that, guess what? They sent a letter. I also armed the Randwick Council with the precautionary principle legal guidelines, how to work it, how to stop these telcos from appealing their decisions, and they used it. And I've actually got the documents right here, their letter, etc. I'll read it to you. How's that? Now, you probably heard that TPG pulled out because of the Huawei issue. You remember that? Okay. That wasn't what they pulled out. We started this in August, just before August, okay? They made their decision that we got the federal government to. We had a federal government member of parliament actually at the TPG meeting, and he was right on our side when he realised all the doctors and all of us doing our thing, and pushed it, and basically this is what occurred. He was a Greens councillor, yeah. I won't mention his name. Well, will, yeah. It's public knowledge. His name's Murray Matson from the Randwick Council. This is what he said. It is my opinion, this is on the Randwick Council's website, if you want to look at it. It is my opinion, news of these findings now mean that we councillors should be applying the precautionary principle to this new phone technology. There are 48 streets across the Randwick City Council area that are going to have small cell facilities built within metres of bedrooms, and council should be calling on the federal government to suspend the rollout of small cell mobile phone facilities until both Telstra and TPG can convincingly show that no significant cancer threat actually exists. He then put a motion, which was passed. That Randwick, this is the motion, that Randwick Council notes that the proposed rollout of another 48 small cell mobile phone facilities across the LGA, on top of the 18 facilities already approved installations, comes at a time when international research by the Razamin, and I'll explain this matter to you shortly, Institute and the US National Toxicology Program reports a link between cell tower radiation and the development of cancer. Accordingly, Council calls on the federal government to intervene to suspend the rollout pending a review of the relevance of international findings to the safety of residents of urban Australia. That was the motion. It was passed. TPG then sent out an announcement. Thank you. Just bear with me, you've got a lot of paperwork.
You are a barrister.
You are a barrister.
You want me to help?
I've just got to find... Just bear with me, folks. Right. This is the Randwick City Council's press release. This was done 2 weeks ago. Last year, on October the 15th, 2018, a consultation was held between the community and TBG to discuss concerns around the company's small cell tower rollout in the community. TPG initially planned on installing a small cell tower at Dundas Street, Coogee. However, at the community consultation, a proposed, less densely populated alternative site of Balmhill Park was suggested. And that's exactly what I did. I said, well, put it somewhere else. Okay? TPG agreed to move the infrastructure. But then I kept going. In a council meeting on the next day, they were very keen to get this sorted. On Tuesday the 16th of October, Council resolved that the proposed rollout came at a time when international research reported a link between cell tower radiation and the development of cancer. Accordingly, Council called on the federal government to intervene and suspended the rollout, pending a review of the relevance of the international findings to the safety of residents in urban Australia. However, on the 29th of January 2019, TPG made how could I explain it? A company announcement that they would cease the rollout of its mobile network altogether. Because of this, TPG no longer intends to proceed with any small cell tower installations or community consultations at Blenheim Park or other locations.
Yay.
This is the letter from TPG.
Yay.
And you'll see it on their website, on Randwick Council's website. Okay? This is a response to that email. To that. Dear Coogee residents, you may be aware that on the 29th of January 2009, TPG made a company announcement that it would cease the rollout of its mobile network. Accordingly, I'm writing to advise you that TPG does not intend to proceed to consultation as proposed, with a proposed alternative small cell facility in Blenheim Park. Coogee. Prior to the company announcement, TPG communicated a decision to propose this alternative site recommended by the community at our public meeting in October regarding the original proposal at Dundas Street. In keeping with the 2019 company announcement, TPG now intends to proceed neither location as proposed. TPG has regretted the anxiety that some people have felt about our small cells, and we have endeavoured to give residents good, reliable information from public health authorities about the safety and regulation of radio facilities, including small cells. We will continue to liaise with residents as required to give them greater peace of mind and ease their concerns. Congratulations TPG for finally admitting it. And to be quite frankly, I thought that was a really generous thing to do, particularly when we serve something on the Mr. Teo himself. So I'll talk about that. We can talk about that later. Now, where else do I go? So, what can we do here? Can we do the same thing? Okay. Now, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the main critical thing that I used, and it was a case. Well, it's actually a study that was done, and this is the first time I've admitted this in public, by the way. Okay. I'll just find the study. Where have I put it? Okay. There was I don't know if you've heard of the Ramazine. It's a Rasmussen, I can never pronounce it right, Institute. They're in Italy. Now, they spent $25 million and quite a few years on doing brain cancer research or cancer research on rats. This institute is a very well regarded institute. Who's heard of benzene? Put your hand up. Do you know how dangerous that stuff is? In the 80s, nobody knew how bad it was, and this institute did a study on rats and found out that there was a very rare cancer caused by benzene. It is now, they were ridiculed back in the 1980s, but now it's considered kosher. It is considered that benzene is a definite carcinogenic, an extremely dangerous substance. They then did exactly the same thing in doing a complete study on electromagnetic radiation in regards to rats. There were 2,500 animals in that study, and they did it on the band of 5 to 50 volts per metre. Now, is anyone here a scientist or anything understand what I'm talking about when I talk about... Okay, we've got Steve Weller. Oh, can I get Steve to come up? Steve, can you just pop up forward? Everyone, this is Steve Weller. Steve Weller's a really nice bloke. I've been dealing with Steve for quite a few years, and Steve is actually an advocate who works inside Arpanza. Okay, so he's a very, very nice bloke. Steve, 5 to 50 watts. So when we're talking about the RF band, okay, or the EMR band, what are we talking about? 3 hertz to 300 hertz, is that right? Non-ionising radiation?
Yeah, well, it's from 0 hertz up to 300 gigahertz.
So 300 gigahertz. So it's
non-ionising radiation also includes light. So it's
Use the mic in your hand. In your hand, the one in your hand.
don't give me the wireless one, please.
Yeah, all I want to know is about 5 to 50 volts. Would this tower be in that range?
Yes, it would be.
Okay.
Yes.
That's what I want to ask. I wanted to say, would this tower, if it's 5 to 50 volts, would this tower be in that range? And he's answered, yes. Thank you. That's what I really wanted from. I always back up my stuff if I can. Now, their study was based on 5 to 50 volts, okay, per metre. And that's what they irradiated these rats with, okay? Now, they then found that these rats developed acoustic neuromas and schwannomas. Has anyone heard of those things before? Okay. Now, can you tell everybody what that is, please?
It's a benign tumour that goes on the acoustic nerve, but also on the heart. There's the same cells, there's Ramona cells. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. I always like to have someone to back up typical barrister stuff, but anyway. Okay, so thank you for that. So basically, it establishes that this study basically said that there is an incident of cancer that is caused by mobile phone use and by the radiation from these things at 5 to 50 volts per metre. All right? I want to volunteer. Just come forward. I'm not even going to pick you. Somebody just come forward, please. Anyone? Somebody. Just come forward. Yep, you've got a young fella over here. Got two here. Another person, come up. Somebody. Anybody? Okay. Now, folks, I'm going to show you something that's going to absolutely freak you out. Okay. Now, I'm going to tell you something. Stay there for a minute, guys. Okay, and I'll get Steve to get involved in this too, if that's all right. There's a guy called Bruce Hocking. He's a doctor, a medical doctor. In 1998, 1999, around that time. In 1998, I think it was, Dr. Bruce Hocking was the chief medical officer for Telstra. He was employed by them. And he did a study on the effects of communication towers and the RF, how it affected people. He concluded that there were 3 cancer clusters of leukemia in children in the Sydney area. That was in 1998. He then got it peer-reviewed and it was published in the Australian Medical Journal. That, folks, is the smoking gun in the Erin Brockovich world. Okay? It's there. If you go onto the APANSA website right now, you'll find they've published another document of his. And if you want to write it down, it's up to you. And there's a document in there on the APANSA website that says, and it's under supporting documents, so this is supporting their work. And it's called The Medical Aspects of Overexposure to Electromagnetic Fields. So this is basically a paper that he put for industry, for people who are technicians who work in towers and install these things and have to maintain them and everything. And he basically talks about what the standard is for their exposure as compared to public exposure. And this is going to be probably the best way to explain it to you all. And he's mentioning it in the 50 to 60 hertz range, and also the 3 hertz to 300 gigahertz, which is exactly what this thing is, and all the other towers around here. He then found that there was an alteration of synapse activity in the brain at 0.075 volts per metre. Now I want you to start understanding what I'm talking about when I'm talking about volts per metre. So he says that. He then says it stimulated nerves at 6.15 volts per metre. Can you see an effect here, folks? Okay. He then said that cardiac muscle can be moved at 12 volts per metre. The 2009 ICNIRP standard limits, which is what APANSA relies on to set their standards in Australia, says that the induced in situ electro field to 0.1 volts per metre at 50 hertz towards the basic is what's known as termed the basic restriction. So what I'm talking about here is that 0.1 of a volt per metre in electric field is considered the basic restriction under ICNIRP. Okay? So therefore, the occupational exposure set for workers is 0.1 volt per metre. The public exposure limit that's been set under the APANSA guidelines is 200 volts per metre. This is fact. This is not stuff out of the sky, okay? Folks, what that means is that the public exposure limit is set 20,000 times higher than the occupational exposure. They're more concerned about workplace health and safety because they know it's more litigious than in the public arena. Now I'm going to do a little test. What did I say was the standard? 0.01? Okay. I've got a little device here on the end of my mobile phone. Now you can purchase it at JCar, and I'd like you to read that for me, please. I'll read it to you. It's Digitech. It's called Smartphone Electromagnetic Sensor Plug-in Module. It measures electromagnetic VM readings. Little device, get it for 29 bucks at JCar. I'm going to turn it on. That's why they're here. Am I getting the message across, folks?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, the ambient volts per square metre that we're getting right now, that you are being irradiated from the other towers that are in the other vicinity, not the one they haven't built yet. They're all talking to each other, remember? This tower over there is talking to that tower 4 kilometres away, and they're zooming in each other and saying, "G'day, how you going?" Can you read what the ambient voltage is at the moment, please?
290, 277, 263.
It's pointing at you, that's the problem. You're an antenna, I'll explain that in a minute. Let's just... Crikey, you're right. Oh my God.
208, 201 volts per metre. Yeah.
Okay. That's a little device. Now, you can get that yourselves. Okay, let's get you to hold that, and you can just point it wherever you want. And you tell me what it's reading. It's a directional thing, so you just point it wherever you...
We're getting 150 just pointing it by the crowd.
Okay, thank you. Now, stay there. Did you know, folks, that we actually absorb electromagnetic radiation? That we are actually walking antennas. You are 75% water, and you are actually absorbing this stuff. Which means that anything that's coming from people's mobile phones to towers, etc., it's going through you. Let's find out what his reading is if he touches that little black button. Off you go. On the bottom. So we're going to work out what he's... Okay, read that out to us.
At least 200. At least.
So we got 188, 189. Now some people absorb it a lot more than others. So let's get this gentleman up. And if you could touch it, please. What's the ambient first? 150?
150.
Okay, can you touch it?
Oh, 257, 263, 242.
What's the public limit?
0.01.
It's 200, isn't it? That's what they've said. Okay? Now I'm going to tell you something. I'll get Steve to do it as well. Steve, you want to touch it? So we're at what? Oh, we're at 163 at the moment. He's around 248 is the peak that he's got there. Okay, I'm going to touch it. And I thought so. I'm only 191, so I don't get affected by it as much. But what I can tell you is that one thing about cancer is it has a latency, particularly in brain cancer, and the latency that it has, unfortunately, is 40 years. Now what latency means is from the first time of exposure until it develops, it takes 40 years. And do you think that the science out there backs up people's claims that it's perfectly safe? What I'm trying to tell you is nobody out there, they can all ridicule it and say electromagnetic radiation, studies say, this study says this study says there is a cancer link, this study says there's not. But the reality is there's not one study out there that says that electromagnetic radiation is safe. Period. And that's what we work on. Now, how do you know if you're being irradiated? Thank you, gentlemen. You can take a seat. Thank you, Steve. Thank you. Now, in a court of law, what do I need to show that I'm being irradiated by this stuff? Well, quite simply, folks, I pick up my mobile phone, I look at the bars on my phone from my carrier, I'm being irradiated by that carrier because it's on my phone. What I'm going to tell you is this. This is the basic principle of the law that I apply, okay? When you're when you buy a block of land or you live in a property, you have the right to the quiet enjoyment of that property free from the interference of your neighbour. If your neighbour interferes with your quiet enjoyment, they're creating what we call a nuisance. And you can stop them if they create a nuisance to you. Now the best thing is, and I usually like to use this analogy, say your neighbour put music on, every day, 24 hours a day, even at night, blaring loud music, which is electronic energy, by the way. Can you stop them? Yes, you go and talk to your council and you get an abatement notice, say, look, these mongrels are doing this. There's actually legislation that says, hey, do music after a certain period of time, you're creating a nuisance, stop it. Well, that's the law I apply. It's as simple as that. The whole purpose of these towers, folks, is to do exactly what the neighbour does with the music. Or the neighbour might be burning car tyres in the backyard and all the smoke's drifting over the fence and affecting your enjoyment of your land. It's causing you discomfort. That's all you need to prove discomfort. And discomfort can be in the form of fear. If you're scared of this smoke coming over your fence, or you're scared that your eardrums are going to be blown out because of the neighbour, that's a genuine discomfort. Are you scared of these towers? Yes. Thank you. Right. So how does it work? These towers are purposely built... Can someone just get on? Sorry. Thank you. Oh, you're a legend, mate. Thank you. Whoa! Whoa. Hey, does the 5G interfere with the weather? Okay, I'll keep going. So the basic premise is this, folks, is that these towers, their whole purpose in life is to build something in the neighbour's property and to send a substance from their property onto yours. That's their sole purpose. Did you know that electromagnetic radiation is classed as a pollutant or a contaminant in Queensland? Now, I have in front of me a legal document that has been filed in the Magistrates Court here in Queensland. I'm just going to read something to you. That was part of the submissions that's been placed in this document.